This is the Blood Red Podcast from the Liverpool Echo.
The Blood Red Podcast, courtesy of the Liverpool Echo. I'm Guy Clarke. Welcome along. The Anfield invincibility has gone. Again, more questions than answers from the Reds' defeat to Burnley. A lack of activity in the transfer window. No win in 5 games in the Premier League. No goal in 4. What is going on with Liverpool? To get into all of that, we have our chief Liverpool writer, Ian Doyle, Matt Addison and David Lynch with us. Doyle, I'll come to you first. Are you concerned, and when does a blip become a crisis?
I have to be perfectly honest and say I'm not concerned, because this is exactly what should be happening to Liverpool with the team. You know, we've seen all the injuries. What's actually happened in the last, before Christmas is that they actually surpassed expectations by winning games that perhaps the people didn't think that they would, and they got results where perhaps people thought that they shouldn't. So, I mean, are you concerned they haven't scored, 4 games now in the Premier League? Well, that's obviously a concern, but it's not the first time it's happened. I'd be more concerned if they were looking on absolutely nothing like scoring. I mean, I'm going to mention something now about, we look at the 4 games where they've not scored. Against Newcastle, they should have had at least one, they should have had a penalty, and the Newcastle goalkeeper made a couple of good saves. Against Southampton, they should have had at least 1 penalty, possibly 2. Against Man United, that was more of an even game, but it's United at home. What do you expect? And then last night, if Divock Origi scores that, I know it's all ifs and buts, but if Divock Origi scores that one when he's clean through, it's a completely different game. And he did just about everything but score. I mean, I'm pretty sure if he tried that again, he'd not be able to do it. And then, of course, the Burnley goalkeeper makes a couple of good saves. I'm just going to go back to the penalties. I mean, if I'm going to mention the Manchester United don't score their penalties, then they're not top of the league. It's as simple as that. They get them. Whereas Liverpool haven't. And that's not the reason why Liverpool have been struggling. The reason Liverpool have been struggling is because they've got so many players injured. And the players that, I mean, interesting to me last night is the team was completely split between players who played way too much football and players who played next to none all season. And there was no in between. It was straight there. It was one side or the other. One side you had Alisson, Fabinho, Robertson, Trent Alexander-Arnold, Wijnaldum and Mane. And the other side, you had Origi. How many league games he started this season? I think it's 1. Shaqiri, I think it was his second, or I think it was his second start, wasn't it, in the league? Thiago's hardly played since he's joined. Matic's played about 8 or 9 games through injuries. And I'm sure there's somebody else there. Anyway,
Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain. Yes,
Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain. He's been out for most of the season. So there you go. And of the players that came on, Salah and Firmino played most of the season, and Minamino's hardly been seen. So it's either feast or famine in terms of that. And I think that showed in parts of the performance. But it sounds weird, isn't it, for me to say that? Like, I'm not concerned. Here's Liverpool, the Premier League and world champions, and they're down in 4th, and they can't score goals. But as I said, I'd be more concerned if they were playing altogether absolutely terribly, not creating anything. And even look at the goal that they conceded; it was a penalty. And the amount of there's been a few games this season, Brighton away, Sheffield United at home, where they've conceded penalties. Funny enough, that was Mike Dean, the Sheffield United game as well, although it was from VAR. So, in typical contrary style, while everybody else in it will be absolutely, opening the windows, jumping out of them, even if they're on like the second floor, I'll be underneath catching them and saying, come on, it's not too bad. There's a long way to go. It's still only 19 games. I mean, at the start of the season, I didn't think Liverpool would win the league for a variety of reasons. Admittedly, one of them wasn't that they couldn't score a goal and half the team would be injured. And let's not forget, Liverpool are still the Premier League's top scorers. So it just kind of shows you how bad everybody else has been. But yeah, I thought for other reasons. So I'm not surprised where they are. When I was speaking to Lynch earlier today, we were in the same WhatsApp group where I said something on the lines of, I didn't think they'd win it this season. When Van Dijk got injured, I was pretty sure they wouldn't. And when Gomez got injured, they definitely weren't going to. And if you'd have said when Gomez got injured that halfway through the season, Liverpool would only be 6 points off the top, I'm pretty sure nearly every Liverpool fan would have said, yeah, we'll take that.
Yeah, is that the right thing, David? Actually putting some perspective into this, the 4 games in isolation, and as Doyle says, they're the injuries that have happened, and yet we are only at the halfway stage. 4 weeks ago, everyone was tripping over themselves to give Liverpool the title.
Well, that's it. I feel like I say this a lot, is that you have to remind yourself that on Christmas Day Liverpool were top, and the last game they'd played they'd won 7-0 away from home. Now, in talking about the recent run they've been on, with there's a lot of crisis is getting thrown around, and talk about Liverpool's long-term decline. I saw someone comparing it to Pochettino at Spurs the other day. Now, I think we need to sort of row back a little bit and think this is four results on the bounce in the league that have really damaged Liverpool's title chances. And it's nothing more than that. I don't think we're seeing the signs of long-term decline. I'd certainly like to get another 10, 15 games down the line and see where Liverpool are before we sort of start talking about anything like that. I think it's just been a weird season and a weird run. I think I was probably more optimistic about Liverpool's title chances than Doyle at the start of the season. I thought Liverpool had addressed depth issues that they had. You had that little worry about centre-half, but you're not thinking that two of them are going to knock off with long-term knee injuries either, are you? You're thinking that was a minor weakness in comparison to what the other sides had. And I think that sort of played out really in terms of, you look at City and United, they're the two maybe up there for the title with Liverpool. They haven't really, they're not putting up an incredible points tally. That Liverpool aren't close to them is because of their own failings. And I do think a lot of that comes down to this little run has basically been a culmination of sort of the fatigue from early in the season and players not being in form and who've missed a lot of football coming in. As Doyle says, it's a mix and match team. Some who've played too much, some who've played too little. So I think a little bit of that coming together. And then obviously long term, I do think the title chances have been harmed by the lack of centre halves and the filling in gaps and maybe losing a little bit of rhythm in how you set your team up. But I think it's I do think it's over the top in some of the assessments that have been coming out of Liverpool, and I do think you get a couple of wins under your belt and all of a sudden you're right back up there. And like I say, I don't necessarily now expect Liverpool to maybe win the title this season as I previously did, but I think all this talk about the top four place being under threat, I think that's a little bit premature at the moment.
Yeah, Matt, I suppose one of the big things is how it has sort of snowballed, and initially it was a few concerns over the lack of goals for 3 games, but now it seems to have become a much wider issue.
Yeah, I think that's the concern, isn't it? I'm slightly more worried, certainly, than what Doyle is at the moment in terms of the sort of slump in what
Nothing to worry about.
I do think, the word crisis, I think, is slightly too much at this stage, but we're sort of on the way towards it rather than in one at the moment. I think, for me, Liverpool obviously haven't been playing particularly well over the last few games, which is a concern, but this season of all seasons, that can change very quickly. And if they were to win over the weekend, they could then beat Tottenham, and suddenly everyone's thinking, there's none of this talk of, they might not even get in the top 4 and things like that, which I think is over the top. I think that's fairly safe that Liverpool will do that. It's just a case of, is that enough? Is that enough in comparison to what the expectations were at the start of the season? So for me, the concern sort of stems partly from the performances and partly because of the difficult run of fixtures they've got coming up. And that can go in one of two ways, of course. It could be that they start to win a few of these games. They beat a few of the teams around them. I think they play Tottenham, Man City and Leicester within the next sort of 5 or 6 Premier League fixtures. If you win 2 or 3 of those matches, then suddenly the situation looks very different. And we're not talking about Liverpool being behind. We're talking about them being in front, aren't we? So it can change very, very quickly. It's just a concern when you see, 1 goal in 5 league games, not playing particularly well in all sorts of areas of the pitch. The 2 fullbacks, the sort of efficiency and effectiveness of both of them has stopped, when before that was sort of a key flow of how Liverpool attack. So it's a combination of a few things. I think it's slightly more than a blip, but not quite into a crisis. But at the same time, you can sort of foresee a situation where Liverpool just have 1 goal that goes in. The Divock Origi chance last night would have been the ideal one. I think if that goal goes in, we're talking about a very different situation at this moment in time. I think the sooner something just goes for Liverpool, it clicks, the confidence comes back, everyone can then relax, and hopefully we get to see the old Liverpool come back.
And this to anyone who wants to take it, then, are Liverpool now out of the title race, or is it still well and truly on?
I mean, from points of numbers, yeah, it's on. But, God, this is going to sound terrible, isn't it? I genuinely never thought they were ever really in it, for all the reasons that I've already said. Forget the injuries. I just thought no fans. I think it's also interesting that Liverpool had that little spell, didn't they, where they had fans at Anfield. And then, okay, the West Brom game was slightly different. But then since then, they've come back and played United and Burnley and they haven't scored a goal. I reckon that's contributed as well. You're telling me that Liverpool wouldn't have been a slightly different proposition in the second half of both of those two games, kicking towards the Cup? I reckon they would have done, and it would have. We've said this loads of times. It's not just Liverpool that's affected, but it's almost like Liverpool's unbeaten home record. It almost doesn't count. They lost to Burnley because there was nobody there. It may as well have just been played anywhere. Doesn't really matter, does it? The kind of the novelty. Maybe when they first started playing behind closed doors, that's long gone now. They may as well they could almost play. And I know it was that ridiculous suggestion at the start, wasn't it, where we could play all the games at neutral venues. If you remember, about last June, wasn't it, or May or June, they were talking about it. They can almost do it now because probably going to be no fans again this season. They could just play it anyway. It didn't really matter. Doesn't really matter. And I know it doesn't quite work like that in terms of, some clubs, they'll say it's our dressing room, this, that, and the other, but ultimately it's out on the pitch. And I think, going back to your question, I think Liverpool, I think they are out of the title race. Don't think they're going to win it. No.
I disagree. I disagree for a couple of different reasons. I think Kevin De Bruyne's injury could help shape the sort of title race. I think I'm still not convinced 100% that Manchester United will be able to maintain themselves. I don't think, Leicester are in a very similar situation. I don't think they'll be able to sort of maintain it. I think, as you say, there's a long way to go. And look, if Liverpool are 7 or 8 points behind in a month's time going into that Manchester City game, then it's a very different situation. But I think the next few games are what decides, where Liverpool's priorities have to be for the remainder of this season. I don't think it's gone just yet.
David, you got the final vote?
To be honest, I think it's not necessarily these recent performances that convince me, and I do think they can go on a little run. I think it's just long term over the remainder of the season. I just think that centre half loss is going to be felt in some way. You're looking at well, not necessarily last night, I suppose, but when they concede a goal against West Brom, that when Van Dijk's there, you just feel that they become immune to that sort of thing. I just think over the sort of remainder of the season, I think they'll feel that enough to just lose enough points to not put them in it. But yeah, like I said earlier, I don't think top 4 or anything like that is under threat at the moment. So I don't think they're going to be terrible.
Man City have won the league, by the way. Man City have already won it. There's no way United aren't going to win it. No chance.
I think Man City have solved some of their issues, haven't they? That in a different way than I sort of expected in terms of their defensive strength now is something that could really provide a platform for them to win the league. And even though they're not as great going forward as they were in previous seasons, they, like you say, Liverpool's still top scorers in the Premier League this season. I just think City have got enough nous about them as well to just grind out those 1-0 wins that will probably win them the league.
And it'll be, I've said this a few times, United, I'm not surprised that United are top. I said this back in November, December, and I seem to remember everybody laughed at me, going, they're not good enough, they're never going to, look who's top, coming towards February. I hate to say like I told you so on that one, but...
Yeah, I bet you do. Yeah.
On this Liverpool Blood Red podcast, here I am gloating about United being top of the league. Yeah, that's going to get out really well. Anyway, but the point being with them is that this was, again, it has to be this kind of sequence of events or circumstances that just suited United. They've got a squad of, don't care what you say, there's hardly a world-class player in there. There's a couple of very good players, but there's not many world-class, if any, world-class players. Certainly not anymore. The keeper used to be one, but he's not anymore, unfortunately for him. But they've got so many players on the same level. They're good players to very good players, and they can come in and mix and match. And on top of all of that, they haven't even needed to do that, because they've hardly had an injury this season, which is incredible. And I think that's to do with the economy, the way that they play the game, the economy of style of play, where you've seen they tend not to do that much running around. They keep in position defensively and play in the counter-attack, which is brilliant when they're playing against the rubbish teams. But, for United, they've played this season all competitions, City twice, Liverpool, Tottenham, Chelsea and Arsenal, and they've scored 1 goal, and that was a dodgy penalty. So, you're not going to win the league if you don't beat any of the teams around you. And they also drew at Leicester. So, United aren't going to win it. I think City, something like a global pandemic would have to stop Manchester City from winning the league. So, what could be even more strange than that? Actually, no, let's not joke about that, just in case something does happen. No.
Yeah, and probably not otherwise, undoubtedly. But let's go through some of the themes then as to what is wrong with Liverpool. And Doyle, I'll come back to you on the point of the fans. You mentioned it before, and I just wonder psychologically for the players, obviously the scenes after winning the Champions League in Madrid surely that must have played some role in spurring the players on to the start to last season that they had. They came back after the lockdown for the restart, knowing effectively they had this title wrapped up. And I wonder maybe what impact not being able to, we saw all the pictures with the players with the trophies on the pitch at Anfield, but what impact it's had not being able to actually celebrate it with the fans that may well have had on Liverpool.
It'll only be said to have an effect if Liverpool start losing games, which is what they're doing now. Nobody was saying this back earlier in the season, but the reality is the longer it goes on, and don't forget that we've switched from a situation where towards the end of September, they were thinking, right, we're going to get people back in for the Sheffield United game in October, which was going to be 12,500. And so it was seen to be just a temporary thing. Then it moved to like November, December, and they only allowed 2,000 in. And now the Premier League are talking about no one's going to be allowed in again this season. So, in that sense, it's not just Liverpool that's affected. But the thing with Liverpool is, there are a couple of other Premier League teams who are the same, that Liverpool sell themselves on this whole LFC family and playing in front of the crowd, and even at away games where you're playing in front of the away supports, it's all part of this one thing. And if you buy into that, the players come and buy into it, and that's what's helped them. If no one was in the ground against Barcelona, they wouldn't have won 4-0 in the Champions League semi-final. Let's put it that way, right? So that shows the effect that the fans can have. And for a team like Liverpool, who've got these players a lot of them have come to the club on the back of this history of the fans and the whole thing, the ethos, especially under Klopp, he gives it the old LFC family and all that, one big club together, all the fans and the team united. Well, the fact of the matter is they're not united at the moment, because since last March, isn't it, they've been tens, hundreds, thousands of miles apart, all over the place, because they've not been able to all go and congregate in the, going to say where they go and worship, as it were. It's not like a church, but it's almost like it is a cathedral, isn't it, of football, as opposed to a theatre of dreams, which we'll come on to a bit later on. But that's been missing from Liverpool's game, and I think that has affected them when things haven't been going particularly well. And you look how many home games this season where it's been a bit tight, and Liverpool's, it's no coincidence, and I've said this before, that they scored the last minute winner against Tottenham when there was people in the stadium. For me, don't think that's a coincidence.
I just wonder how many Manchester United references you're allowed on the Blood Red podcast before you get booted off.
Well, they're playing them this week, and they played them last week, so it's okay.
Yeah, fair enough. David, one of the issues that came out of Jurgen Klopp's post-match press conference after Burnley was the issue of transfers. We had a big debate on it on Monday's podcast, but that seems to be another thing at Liverpool right now, that when things aren't going right, people bring up whether or not Liverpool should have signed a centre-half, but even now to who's actually in charge of it all.
Yeah, I think, Klopp sort of addressed this, didn't he, in his press conference today, in terms of, this is no sort of surprise that this is the way things are, this is how Liverpool operate, that he doesn't have the final say on transfers, so no one should really be surprised about it. And I think he's right, really. I think this is just the way it is. I don't think you can complain about that. I think you know what you're going to get with FSG and the way that they're going to approach things. And at the end of the day, that's been the platform that's set up, the last couple of years or 3 years, I suppose, if you include the Champions League final run as well, of great success and great performances. I suppose it's not always going to go your way, and I think if there is one criticism of that approach, it's that it's fine margins, isn't it? In terms of you give yourself very little room for manoeuvre when things start to go wrong, and I think we're maybe sort of seeing that now, and that gamble maybe on the amount of centre halves that Liverpool had. Is that something that other clubs will be forced to do if they've got limitless funds? I suppose not, and maybe that's coming back to bite Liverpool a little bit, but. I don't think there's any real, it's been spoken about as if there's this huge internal dispute between Klopp and FSG, and I really don't think that's the way that they work, and I don't think that's the way things are going at the moment. People are right to probably be frustrated that there hasn't been a centre-half brought in January, and like I said earlier, I think that's one of the key reasons that I don't think Liverpool are going to win the league. So if it had been possible, maybe it would have been nice to see someone brought in, but it hasn't happened, and this is just the hand that Liverpool fans, I suppose, have been dealt, and you just got to get behind the team and sort of see how things progress from there, because it's, this is going to be a real test for them, is finishing the season and not letting this little run sort of completely unravel the season, and then being able to say, we didn't bring someone in January, so that's why it happened. I think there's enough quality in that squad and the manager sort of overcome transfers as an underlying theme of this season. I don't think they should be sort of falling back on that.
No, what was it? 3 months ago, Liverpool had won the transfer window, wasn't it? With Thiago, Tsimikas, and Diogo Jota. Always a dangerous award, that one, winning the transfer window. But Matt, is it maybe? Are we going too far afield? Talking of fans, talking of transfers, things behind the scenes. Is this not all a central issue of what's happening on the pitch, and at the moment it's just not functioning?
Well, to be honest, I think it's a combination of all sorts of things. I don't think it's one thing that you could say it's definitely that. I think the fans do play a part. I've sort of had my say on the podcast in the past about how much of an impact that should make, how much it does make. I do think there's, certain percentage of difference that not having fans there does have in certain matches. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think it's that in conjunction with the fact that they don't have enough centre-backs. Again, there's the issue of money and finances and all sorts of things, the forward planning, what do they do in the summer? All of these things have to be considered. It's not just as simple as, we need another one, let's just go and do it. So it's that, it's so many different things. It's the lack of form, it's a seeming lack of confidence. I think there's been times this season when a few different players have looked a bit fatigued and tired. That was a word that Jurgen Klopp didn't recognise, was it, in his press conference the other day, was fatigue. But I think certainly, that's something that we've seen a fair few players sort of suffer from over the last sort of few weeks. And it's just a sort of conjunction of all of those things coming at the same time for Liverpool, which has caused what is happening at the moment, which is sort of collective blip individually as well. And it's just one of those things that there's no easy solution. If there was an easy solution, I'm sure Liverpool would have gone and done it, because we've said it enough times, not getting a centre-back or not performing at the right levels could cost them in the long run. But look, it's not quite as simple as that. I think they just have to sort of get themselves through this little period and reassess where they're at in a month's time. And as I say, if in a month they're in a similar sort of situation, then you can start to look and say, well, do you focus more on the Champions League? Do you look at trying to get back into the top four? You sort of reassess your priorities at that point. But at this stage, it's just a case of keeping going, making sure they try and turn around what has gone wrong as quickly as they can, because look, the quicker we can stop talking about this blip and stop trying to find reasons, the better.
If you'd have asked any of Liverpool's rivals this time last year, can you give us a little checklist of things that we'd quite like to go wrong for Liverpool to give us a really good chance to go right? But you can get rid of Van Dijk for stars. Okay, he's gone. Right, Trent Alexander-Arnold's a really important player. Can he have a bit of rubbish form? Okay, he's gone. Right, they're really good at Anfield. Is there anything you could do that could possibly negate that influence? Okay, that's gone. And also, the money situation. Just in case they want to try and sign anybody. Okay, they can't do that either. And I know that there are some of those like the as we said before, the transfer stuff, and that's affecting, because no one's signing anybody this month. That's affecting all clubs. But to try and there's been like a all of these events have conspired to go against Liverpool. Everything that could have possibly gone wrong for Jurgen Klopp probably has done, and he was, it's going to be difficult for Liverpool to win the league from this position. But what's interesting is that talking to the top four, because this season will be taken in isolation. Years to come, this will just be seen as a freakish season, an anomaly. But you'd like to think that next season the fans will be coming back in and people will start be moving around again. You don't want to be not in the Champions League then, because then Liverpool will be trying to get players to come and join them in the summer. So it's the old thing. It's almost like we come full circle. It's right back to Klopp's first season. It's like we've got to get in the Champions League, because we need to do this to try and get the players back in. And they weren't able to do it that year, but I would imagine they've got a lot better chance of doing it this time around from the position with the squad that they've got in terms of the talent they've got already. If you take away the centre back situation, look at the rest of the squad. There's like Jota has to come back, but the rest of the squad is still, there's players, as we've said before, they're coming back from injury, trying to get their feet, and it may end up being that the likes of Oxlade-Chamberlain, Thiago, Jota will end up being massively influential in the last 2 or 3 months of the season, and the fact that the season ends so relatively late in terms of games played could end up working in Liverpool's favour in the end.
Are you saying that this year's league table is going to be like Boxing Day 1963 graphic that we see every year?
Every single time, everyone just waits for it. There it is. Okay, yeah. Is it Tottenham beat Everton 10-4 or something stupid like that? Yeah.
Something like that. I wonder if this year's league table is going to be the league table equivalent of that. But David, we've mentioned Virgil van Dijk there, and one thing that sort of jumped out to me last night watching on was an element that we've maybe not realised that Liverpool have missed of what he brings, which is that calmness and that composure. When he first arrived, it was what everyone said had been missing and that he brought. And that incident at half-time that happened, and Jurgen Klopp squaring up with Sean Dyche, it all seemed to be getting a bit tetchy, and Liverpool losing their composure, which when Van Dijk's there just doesn't seem to happen.
Yeah, and I feel that's also maybe something that Van Dijk's maybe underrated in that sort of element of the game in terms of being a real leader and being a captain without the armband. But I do think it's worth mentioning. It would have been interesting to see how Jordan Henderson would have dealt with that situation. Would he have allowed his teammates to get that frustrated and sort of get themselves wound up by Burnley side, who were basically just using the exact same tactics that you would expect of Burnley under Sean Dyche? There's nothing there to get wound up about. That is just how Burnley play. Liverpool have come up against it over these past few seasons. They shouldn't be surprised, and they shouldn't be, allowing themselves to get frustrated by it. So I do think they missed that leadership there. And in terms of Van Dijk as well, I think another thing that possibly you saw they missed and was part of the game yesterday was his passing from deep is a real thing that I think Liverpool, in terms of switching the angle of attack and the way he fades across the ball and makes it look like he's going to play to one side, but then he plays it to the other. That gets Liverpool's fullbacks up the pitch and allows the wingers to come in, and I think that's something they're really missing at the moment. So I think that's something that's unsettling the team slightly. Though that said, I don't think if someone offered you now that Matip and Fabinho would play another 15 games together over the remainder of this season, I don't think Liverpool will be in a position at the end of the season where they can be looking back and saying that the Van Dijk thing would be enough to cost them top four. In terms of the title, maybe, but in terms of top four, this level of performance shouldn't stop if you have a partnership as good as that at the back. Because I think that Fabinho has proven himself, even though he sort of lost his temper a little bit yesterday. I think he's been absolutely phenomenal at centre half and really stepped up to the plate. And also Matip, coming in after a few days training, thought he was outstanding again as well. They're unfortunate really to not keep a clean sheet. So Liverpool have got enough quality and should have enough composure there at the back, even without Van Dijk, to pick things up.
Yeah, Matt, the question then following on from Van Dijk, and David mentioned Jordan Henderson as well, is who is the more influential and more important player? Because when you look at the numbers with Jordan Henderson, when he isn't there for Liverpool, Michael Reed on Twitter putting a tweet out about it and saying since the start of last season, Liverpool's win rate with Jordan Henderson is 76%. Without him, it's 58%. It seems to be a huge gulf.
Yeah, it certainly is. There was a follow-up to that tweet as well, which said that the 6 defeats that Liverpool have had in the Premier League since the start of last season, 4 of them have been without Henderson, and 1 of them has been with Henderson at centre-back. So you can sort of see when he's not there, those are when those defeats do come. And it is a huge sort of thing to plug the gap. I mean, trying to pick the difference or who's the most important between Henderson and Van Dijk, I mean, it's very, very difficult. I think the obvious answer, your sort of instinct would be to say, well, it's Van Dijk, isn't it? Because he's the best centre-back in the world. But, you look at the statistics, you look at the numbers, you even just see it with your own eyes, don't you? With Jordan Henderson on the pitch, you just see that greater intensity. And I think it's about leadership as well. I think yesterday we saw, obviously, there was no Van Dijk, there was no Henderson. James Milner was on the bench and didn't come onto the pitch. And I think Liverpool just sort of lost their way a little bit. I think it sort of links back into that composure thing, not just in terms of, the sort of Fabinho clash and that thing, but in terms of on the ball as well, that composure of being able to move it about and create those gaps and create those spaces against a team which is set up in a very deliberate way to sort of, frustrate you, I suppose. So, yeah, I think that to try and choose which is the most influential is almost impossible. But in their own different ways, I think they bring, so much to the table. It's leadership, it's that passing, it's dictating the tempo, and it's just talking through the game that, for the rest of those players on the pitch. I think, very, very much we saw that was missing. I know, Doyle, I'm sure, could explain it far better from being in the stadium in terms of, where the sort of loudness of Jordan Henderson comes into play and how he does talk every single player through the match every single week. I think when you take that out, combined with everything else, all of the other factors that are missing as well, it's almost a deadly combination.
was going to say it was very, very quiet. In fact, it was that quiet I think the players could hear me just shouting how rubbish the game was at them. So, it was perhaps not the best motivation, I must say. But the other thing that's not been mentioned about Van Dijk as well, and that would have been very helpful yesterday, is his threat from set pieces as well in terms of scoring goals, given the fact that I think Liverpool, I told it up as 23,000 crosses. And I think 22,089 of them hit the first man or something like that. And the others were overhit. And, it was interesting. Am I right in saying that Ben Mee got man of the match on Sky? Is that correct?
I'm not sure. I don't know.
I don't think so. He surely can't have.
I'm sure that they gave it to him. Somebody can correct me on that. Because I was thinking, how can they possibly give it to him? I must admit, I only saw it in, at the corner of my eye on the screen that we have at the stadium. So it did. That's only just come to me then, as if to say, hang on a minute, didn't you just give the ball away for the Origi?
Yeah, I'm sure it would have been Nick Pope who was man of the match, but
yeah, that's probably made a bit more sense, to be honest. That would make a bit more sense. But yeah, it must have been because they interviewed him after the game, didn't they? Yeah,
yeah, so they were praising him a lot. Yeah,
but Van Dijk, they missed his threat from because he scored quite a few goals and important goals, didn't he? In fact, the game against United last season, he scored the opener from a corner. So there you go. I've got to give you a nice segue there. Come on.
Yeah, we will move on to Manchester United. The one thing I just wanted to ask David about Jordan Henderson was this year we've spoken so much about Wijnaldum's contract, Salah recently, the situation at centre-half, but is that not a big sort of danger sign that's flashing down the road that Liverpool are going to have to replace Jordan Henderson? It probably won't be in all too long in terms of distance in time when they have to do that.
Yeah, I suppose it's, you look at the age profile of some of the midfielders they have, and you've maybe been hoping that the Naby Keita will be coming up and taking that mantle from Jordan Henderson and being a real dominant force in midfield, or even an Oxlade-Chamberlain. I know it's a different sort of midfielder, but Klopp wants him to operate in a similar way. But neither of those has really had has stepped up to the plate, really, have they? And the injury problems have really held them back. So it's looking like, Liverpool are going to have an issue in midfield pretty soon. Wijnaldum's another one, obviously, is his contract situation. So really, going into next summer, I think midfield's an area where Liverpool are going to think that they're going to have to do a bit of shopping because, I think maybe with the Thiago signing, there was a little bit of thinking that, okay, if we don't get an extra centre-half, then Fabinho can play back there at times, and that gives all these midfielders a game. Really, we're sort of walking into a situation where Liverpool desperately do need to sign another midfielder regardless, I think, because I just don't think they can rely on those two who are particularly injury hit, as any replacement for anyone or to work and push anyone out of the team. So, they've got work to do in central midfield, I think, and that's something they're really going to have to look at in the summer.
Yeah, interesting. We'll touch base on that again, I'm sure. But let's take Doyley's segue then and move on to Manchester United. We got through half an hour without mentioning Divock Origi, Matt, who didn't have a great night against Burnley at Anfield. But I suppose the big question is going into Manchester United, how the Liverpool get back to scoring ways and get through to the fifth round of the FA Cup.
Well, I mean, if I had the answer to that, I'd probably be working under Jurgen Klopp, wouldn't I, for Liverpool's coaching staff? I mean, it's a really difficult question to answer. I don't think Divock Origi is the answer. I didn't think that before yesterday's game, and unfortunately, I was proven to be correct with that. I mean, I suppose you would go back and you've got to imagine against Manchester United now that Roberto Firmino and Mohamed Salah will both play. The fact that they didn't start last night suggests that they're both going to start in this one. You've probably got to imagine that Sadio Mane will be there as well. I think Liverpool, for me, have to go relatively strong. I think they will make a couple of changes. I think Manchester United will do the same. But just off the back of this run, I think they need to sort of try and get back as quickly as possible and try and get a few goals. So I'd be playing all of the big hitters, playing it almost as if it was a league game with one or two changes in there as well. And just trying to play Liverpool back into form, really. So it's going to be fascinating, I think, to see exactly how Jurgen Klopp lines up. I mean, earlier in the season, I wasn't convinced that it was a massive priority, the FA Cup for Liverpool this season. I thought that the Aston Villa lineup probably was more a case of him putting those players in just to get rhythm back in, to break up that gap between, Southampton and Manchester United. But I think tomorrow's lineup, or Sunday's lineup, I should say, should give us a little bit more of an indication when you consider that it's Tottenham on Thursday, just, how important the FA Cup is for Liverpool this season.
Yeah, but not in the title race, Doyle, because they were never in it. And top four seemingly guaranteed from what we discussed earlier. Jurgen Klopp made reference in his press conference to the fact the FA Cup is one-off games this season and will be decided on the night. So is the FA Cup there for the taking for Liverpool?
But we said this on an earlier podcast, didn't we? That again, with it being one-off games and some of the games being played in midweek, I think Klopp quite fancies the FA Cup this year, to be honest. And I think Liverpool do have a squad now which, for all the talk of the injuries, they could make loads of changes and it would still be strong, partly because of the fact that quite a lot of the players have had to play in the Premier League this season because of the injuries. So in some ways, Liverpool's FA Cup run might benefit from the Premier League, season being a bit of an issue with it, players being missing. So yeah, I think he would quite fancy a bit of a go at this competition. It doesn't help that they've drawn Manchester United away in the same way that it didn't help that they drew Everton last season or a couple of seasons before that. Chelsea in the fifth round last year is different because you get down to the last 16 then, so you expect to come up against good teams. Whereas you don't ideally want to be playing Man United, especially Liverpool should have been playing Villa, shouldn't they, away from home? So they should have been Villa's. A team where they lost 7-2 back in October, so that would have been a difficult game in itself. So it's going to be interesting. Funny enough, for all the reasons, Liverpool's record at Old Trafford is quite poor under Klopp. Pretty sure they haven't won a game, have they? They haven't won a game since 2014 when they got about 10 penalties. They've used up their entire century's quota in one match.
How many crosses did they play that day? Yeah.
I don't. No crosses were needed. It was just three balls. Three balls just got in behind. But for those reasons, United haven't been particularly great. I know they've started winning a few games at home now, but I think a lot of the reason that perhaps Liverpool haven't performed at Old Trafford, the arena, the fans, all that kind of stuff, that's all gone now. So I actually quite fancy Liverpool on Sunday because I think they've got a point to prove and they're playing against a team that doesn't have any world-class players. So come on, get it sorted.
What do you make of that, David? Is it one of those form goes out the window and chance for Liverpool?
It never goes out the window. The form book never goes out the window, ever. The form book never goes out the window. It's the biggest lie ever. Otherwise, on Derby Day, you got to be careful when you're walking, because all of these, you're going to get hit by all these form books. Anyway.
Well, if
didn't see the bait there, Doyle. Didn't see the bait.
I know. It just annoys me.
If that's true about the form book, and I do tend to agree with that, then United are in the better form of the two, aren't they? They probably should have won the Anfield game in terms of the chances they created. I thought were better, and they looked like they grew in confidence, and more the more that game went on, sort of believed they could beat Liverpool. Now, bringing them back to their own place a week later, Liverpool having suffered another shock result, another poor result. I don't think the confidence will have, taken a dent from that. So, I think United will be feeling that they can get a win. Maybe that's what Liverpool need, is to come up against a United side who are going to sort of approach it differently to what the teams they've come up against at Old Trafford in recent years. It's been very negative, hasn't it? United's aim has basically been to sort of try and ruin the game. So I think if maybe at Old Trafford they'll get a little overconfident maybe, and that'll give space to Liverpool's attackers that they've just been completely denied over the last 4 games, and maybe we see a fast breakaway leading to a shot, which we haven't seen for quite a while from Liverpool, and that sort of thing. So hopefully that could maybe play into Liverpool's hands. But I do think on paper this is extremely difficult. I don't really agree with Doyle either that there's no world-class players in that United team.
Name one.
I think Bruno Fernandes is in that.
You just completely negated your own argument there.
Yeah, I really do think he's a world-class player, and I think I think Liverpool should be concerned about him. He's at the heart of everything United do well, but on the other side, the flip side of that is obviously if they keep Fernandes quiet and they can really shut him down, do a job on him in midfield, it makes the game a lot harder for United. So it's an interesting one. I think from Liverpool's perspective, they'll be hoping that maybe United do get that little bit of overconfidence and maybe play into their hands a little bit tactically, and that a win at Old Trafford, even though it's only in the FA Cup and it doesn't necessarily get the title challenge back on track. What that would do for confidence for Liverpool at the moment, it would be absolutely huge, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it certainly would. Feels as though it could do that with Liverpool getting the first goal in this game. I know the key in any match, but that wait for a goal and obviously the magnitude of the game.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's felt like that for 4 or 5 games, hasn't it? That Liverpool, the first goal would change everything. But I think, yeah, certainly against Manchester United, that would, as David says, force them to come out. If Liverpool go a goal ahead, then of course they have to chase it, which would suit Liverpool. So, yeah, I think it's huge for the mood. It's huge for Liverpool playing themselves back into form ahead of what could be a big game, even in the top 4 race, potentially come the end of this season with Tottenham on Thursday. So, yeah, it's important, and that I think will be reflected in the way that Liverpool line up. I think there will be a few different changes, as I say, but it's not going to be wholesale. I think they'll go pretty strong purely because they have to sort of find a way to get themselves out of this rut. And you can look at the game in 2 different ways, can you? You can look at it, as I have sort of been for the last few days, thinking it's Manchester United. It's probably not the team that you want to be facing, given their form, given the way that they'll be going into the game, thinking that they've a real good chance to put a few past Liverpool. But at the same time, if Liverpool can do that, if they do put in a performance, what a huge lift it could be. And who knows, in a few months' time, we could be looking at one of these games in the next week or so as being the time that it turned and Liverpool got themselves out of a bad run of form, changed it round. And I think certainly if they could put a couple of goals past Manchester United at the weekend, that would just lift everybody, wouldn't it? Because I think as much as Doyle will say that the mood shouldn't be affected and Liverpool were never in the title race, I think there's a lot.
That's not exactly what I said. That's not what I
something
said.
Like that.
They were never in the title race. I said that I didn't think they were going to win the league. That's totally different.
I think a lot of Liverpool fans would probably disagree with that, and I think the mood around the club and the players as well, to be honest, I think would be massively improved.
Well, let's get into our team selection then for the game, because that does feel like it's going to be a large part of the talking points around the game. Addison, Becker in goal, are we agreed on that one, guys?
No, it's Kelleher.
Yeah, I think it will be Kelleher as well, to be honest. I think he's earned his opportunity in the FA Cup. I think he's a more reliable backup, isn't he, than Adrian? You feel less concerned maybe about throwing him in. Good experience for him. You've got to give him something, haven't you, to sort of encourage him to stick around the squad and sort of really feel like he's involved. So I think he's earned a start.
Yep.
Matt, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think it would be harsh not to play him, but I'm going to be harsh. I'm going to put Addison in. As I say, I think this is a big game for Liverpool. I think you have to sort of give Addison the job, really. I think it's one that, yeah, I think it's really important, as I say, in terms of the mood, in terms of the whole season. It's Manchester United, and I'd be going certainly with Addison in goal. There will be 1 or 2 changes in my team, but it's going to broadly look like a Premier League game to me.
Yeah, I'm inclined to
his career
that, but
You've ruined his career there, honestly.
The majority rules. Kelleher in goal for us then. Doyle, back 4. Let you go on this.
The back 4 will be Nico Williams at right back. It will be Kostas, the unseen Tsimikas at left back. And the centre backs will depend on, one of them will be Fabinho. And the other one, if Henderson's fit, he'll be the other centre back. If he's not fit, it'll be Nat Phillips.
I get, obviously the Spurs game is coming up in midweek, but the Trent selection, David, regarding that and him being dropped, I know it's a cup game and therefore maybe the same sort of thinking with Kelleher, but will it serve as somewhat of a wake-up call to Trent as well? He's not been in good form for a little while now.
No, he's been struggling, hasn't he? I think, you do wonder, don't you, the sort of impact of the period he spent out. And I know the manager's touched on that that Trent had basically had a positive COVID test, hadn't he? And basically we don't know what the sort of, physical toll that takes on a footballer. I know some players have suffered with that, and I don't want to, just speculate on that, but he has been so sort of out of sorts recently that it only makes you wonder if he's maybe feeling the toll of that. So I think a rest would maybe be good for him, and you just hope he can get back to that soon. But if he doesn't play, then a good opportunity for Nico Williams. And I saw he did an interview, didn't he, today, and that was quite interesting what he said in that, sort of facing up to some of the criticism he's faced. So it'd be quite nice to see him back in the team and playing well, because he's a big talent as well.
Would you go along with Doyle in resting Matip as well?
Yeah, I think you've got to be very careful with Matip. It's like I said earlier, if you could guarantee that you'll get 15 games together out of Matip and Fabinho for the remainder of the season, I think you wouldn't worry too much about Liverpool and where they finish in the Premier League. So I think, I think you just got to be very careful with him in the cup competitions and maybe just hold him back till you get a bit further on. I think the thing I would maybe change is maybe go with Reece Williams over Nat Phillips. I just think Nat Phillips is more one that Klopp has maybe relied on against physical teams, where I think, obviously we know that United are maybe more of a team who are mobile, so I would maybe put him in there. But obviously, I suppose Doyle said it would maybe be Henderson, didn't he, actually? So, that could be an option if he's fit, I suppose. And I think he will have that in his mind, that he'll want someone who is mobile there. So that's why I would sort of push against maybe Nat Phillips maybe starting it.
Fair enough. Matt, what about the midfield?
Yeah, midfield is where I'm going to make changes. I think I broadly agree with the guys. I think Trent will play at right back, and it'll be a fairly stable defence. In midfield, I'm going to sort of change it up a little bit. I'm going to bring James Milner in. I'm going to start Wijnaldum as the deeper player and have Curtis Jones in there as well. So, that's assuming that if Henderson plays, he will be at centre-back, and I'm just going to take Thiago Alcantara out of the mix, which I'm sure won't be very popular, but I just think he did struggle a little bit for me last night. And I think with a few of these players, you don't want to play too many games in a row, considering the run coming up. So, yeah, I think there's a chance to change it up in this game, and I think that comes in midfield.
Do you go along with that, Doyle?
I am going for a different formation. I'm going for 4-1-5. No, not really. 4-2-3-1. I'm going to have
Where's that been?
Sorry?
Where's that been since City away, eh?
Well, I don't know. No, that was 4-2-4 anyway. 4-2-4 against City.
True.
Yeah, more 4-4-2 actually. 4-2-3-1, and it'll be James Milner and Thiago as the two. I think Thiago needs to just keep on playing now, to be honest. He needs to get used to playing with these players. And the one, in terms of just behind the front three, which can come to in a bit, be Curtis Jones. He can play in the number 10.
Interesting. David, what's your midfield looking like?
Yeah, I think we've seen in the past couple of games, I think Thiago has started really well and faded a little, and that's no criticism of him. He's obviously lacking a little bit in fitness because he's had such a disrupted season. He's only just sort of getting back into his stride. So I think maybe you leave him out with this one with the next game in mind. And I think the midfield there of Milner, you bring him in. He's someone who's a real leader in there. That would be good to get him in, particularly in the run they're in at the moment. And then I think I agree with Matt. I think it's just the same midfield was Wijnaldum and then maybe Curtis Jones. I think it's time to get Curtis Jones back in there. I think he's been unfortunate to sort of been missing out on the team recently. I think he's played really well this season, given the opportunity, and he'd absolutely love to be back in the team for this one when he Manchester United away and try and make an impact on it. So yeah, I think I'll go with that midfield.
I'll stay with you, David. You can lead us on the front three.
Yeah, so I think because of Firmino and Salah not starting the last one, they would maybe come into that front three and hopefully get a bit of form back. And then on the left hand side, if he does feel like Mane needs a rest, then maybe it's one to start Minamino out there. I think his best game for Liverpool is that one he scored in against Palace, and he sort of started out on that left hand side. I think that's a position that probably suits him best. His only problem is that Sadio Mane and Diogo Jota both play there, so he's not really going to get a lot of opportunities in that position. But I think this would be a good chance for him if he could come into that front three and maybe give Mane a rest, and if you need him, he's on the bench.
Matt, what do you make of that?
Yeah, I'd go along with that. I think I agree completely. I think it's pretty certain that we see Salah and Firmino from the start. The question mark really is just over Sadio Mane. I think we see him at some point. It's just a case of, does he play the first hour or so, or does he come off the bench? I'm tempted to sort of use him off the bench and do what I think Jurgen Klopp was trying with Salah and Firmino last night against Burnley, in that it gives you an option to change it up. And we know that Liverpool haven't been scoring loads of late goals and stuff like that. So I think the idea behind that was to keep a couple of players in reserve. So it's a toss-up between do you keep him in or do you not? I think I'm gonna stick with him. I'm gonna play Mane and go with the front three, but I think there's certainly a good argument there to play Minamino instead and save Mane as you go-to option, the first sub off the bench.
Not scoring late goals, Matt. Not scoring any goals at all. That's the issue right now.
I did say that.
Yeah. Doyle, what about the forward three?
Oh, it'll be the three who came off the bench against whichever team they played on Thursday. I've forgotten. Where was I? Who were they? Burnley. It was Burnley. Yeah, it was so it's basically Salah, Firmino, and Minamino. Minamino on the left in the 4-2-3-1, which means that it'll be, as I say, Curtis Jones in behind Firmino. I just think it'd be interesting. Just wait until we get to the score predictions. That's all I'm waiting for now.
Well, what's the score going to be then?
Do me last.
Right.
It's worth it.
Right, Matt, you're up first. Score prediction.
Great. I am going to. I don't know. I'm going to be.
They've lost. He's got them losing. 100%.
Yeah.
100%. You can't say they can get beat,
I'm desperately trying to find some up. No, I'm going to go 2-1 Manchester United.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
I was going to say the same result. To be honest, I think it'd be nice if Liverpool got a goal because I think that would sort of just give them a little confidence boost in and of itself. But I think Manchester United, the confidence they've got, the threat from set pieces, they've got, Fernandes in the form of his life, even though he's not a world class player, according to Doyle.
He's not.
Yeah, I just think they've got enough about them to beat to beat Liverpool on their own patch. So yeah, I'm going to go for a 2-1 defeat, unfortunately.
And Doyle, all hope rests with you.
Well, let's not forget that Manchester United lost 6-1 at home to Tottenham, and they also beat Leeds 6-2. Was it 6-2? 6-2 or 6-2, wasn't it? Yeah. 6-2 at home. So it's not going to be 6-2. Don't worry. It's not that crazy. Yeah, I reckon it's going to be a slightly odd game. I think it's going to be 2-2, and I think Liverpool win on penalties. There you go.
Not as mad as I thought you were initially going to go there, leading towards. I thought you were going to say 4-2 or something like that.
Well, to be fair, I've seen 2 7-2s this season and a 7-0 and a 4-3. So whatever happens, I'll just be like, yeah, whatever. What's the 13th goal going in? Yeah, all right, okay, yeah.
Doyle was reporting on that Boxing Day games that you referred to earlier as well.
Is it straight to penalties or is there extra time?
No, it takes extra time. Come on, you're an Arsenal fan. Arsenal beat
of course.
Yeah,
of course. Anyway, stick with us on the Liverpool Echo ahead of the game, post-match. Of course, here on Blood Red as well, we will have the debrief straight after the game. But from myself, Guy Clarke, Matt Addison, David Lynch and Ian Doyle, Liverpool right now with no transfers, contracts running down and a lack of goals, could say they're facing the perfect storm. The message, though, walk on.